A debrief of this week's election results.
It was a tough night for kids in Pima County, without a doubt.
And turbulent times at Tucson Unified School District.
These dire circumstances offer an opportunity for a rebirth.
This is Metro Week. Hi, I'm Vanessa Barchfield. Welcome to the show. We'll take a deep dive into this week's election results, and we'll also talk to a homeless Vietnam vet about what Veterans Day means to him. That and much more after a look at the week's top stories from the Arizona Public Media Newsroom.
The reconstruction of the Interstate 10 Ina Road interchange has reached the halfway point, and a transportation official says the project is moving along and on schedule. Crews are starting to pour the concrete for a remodeled stretch of Ina Road. They're also working on paving the redesigned stretch of Interstate 10 that Ina will travel over. The Arizona Department of Transportation says drivers will soon be redirected off the temporary lanes that are currently being used for the interstate and onto the newly paved stretch of I-10. The project is still more than a year from completion. When completed, Ina Road will carry traffic over the interstate and the Union Pacific Railroad tracks. Southern Arizona Congresswoman Martha McSally told her House colleagues Monday night she's getting in the race for U.S. Senate. Congressman David Schweikert confirmed the statement to the Associated Press. McSally's office did not return messages seeking comment. Dr. Kelly Ward was the most recognized Republican in the race following Jeff Flake's announcement he would not run for re-election. An iconic store in downtown Tucson is closing its doors on the last day of this year. The owner of the clothing store Hydra says after more than 20 years in business, it's time to do something new. She says she's making the announcement now so she has time to say goodbye to customers and retail neighbors. She also says the closing has nothing to do with downtown changes or politics. For more on all of the week's news, you can always visit our website. That address, news.azpm.org.
Voters weighed in this week on 2 city council elections and a few propositions. Here's a recap of the results. The 2 contested seats for the Tucson City Council were in Ward 3 and Ward 6. All voters within the city limits got to weigh in on both races. In Ward 3, Democrat Paul Durham defeated independent Gary Watson. Durham ran on a platform of making City of Tucson operations powered completely by renewable sources. Ward 6 was a 3-way race between Democrat Steve Kozachik, the incumbent who was first elected in 2009, Republican Mariano Rodriguez, and Mike Cease of the Green Party. Kozachik won that race. The Tucson area propositions were 202 and 203, which asked to raise the city sales tax by 1/10 of a cent on each dollar to pay for improvements at the Reed Park Zoo. Those passed. Proposition 204 would have instated a half-cent sales tax in order to fund early childhood education. The measure failed. Voters also rejected Proposition 406, which would have given the mayor and members of the city council pay raises. Oro Valley residents voted overwhelmingly against Proposition 454, which would have created a secondary property tax to pay for development of the Naranja Park. And 4 school districts asked voters to authorize bonds or overrides. All were rejected except for Flowing Wells Unified School District's $24 million bond. Now we're going to unpack what those results mean. To do that, I'm joined in our studios by Dylan Smith of the Tucson Sentinel, the Tucson Weekly's Jim Nintzel, and Hank Stephenson of the Arizona Daily Star. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks for having us.
I want to start off by just a quick lightning round. What was the biggest surprise of the results? Dylan, I'll start with you.
I don't know if it was so much a surprise, but interesting is the sort of split vote we're seeing in the 2 propositions over the zoo. One of them is passing, one of them is narrowly failing, at least as we know as we're having this discussion.
Exactly, and right now we're taping this when it's too close to call, so more on that coming up. Jim, biggest surprise for you?
It's got to be the zoo. Everything else was pretty predictable.
I'll go contrarian. I'm going to say 3 out of 4 of the school bonds and overrides failing wasn't necessarily a surprise, but when you couple that with what happened up in Maricopa County, where they got a clean wash of 22 out of 22 school funding issues approved, the fact that Pima County went in a very different direction, I think that was surprising.
I want to now talk Proposition 204. Was it problems in its conception? Was it outside money? What led to its downfall?
Yes, probably a little bit of both of those. I think, you know, if I had to say what was at the heart of the problem there, they built a proposition before they built a coalition. where they were kind of going to people and saying, this is our plan, you're with us or you're against us, versus kind of bringing a community group together. And they did to some degree, but needed to do more, get people on board before finalizing the draft language and putting everything out there. And rather than trying to kind of browbeat people into supporting the measure, give them some stake at the beginning. I think that would have gone a long way. And also, the easy thing to point to was the lack of a sunset on that thing. That's a very standard thing that you put in place when you're putting out a new tax. It just gives people that peace of mind, and that didn't have that, and I think that made it kind of an easy target.
And of course, almost every spending initiative in Pima County failed. What's going on, Jim?
It was a tough night for kids in Pima County, without a doubt. I think Hank is correct in that you had a failure to get a good coalition together on the Prop 204, which is early childhood education, something Democrats would normally champion. However, in this case, you can expect Republicans to oppose it, and then you also had a large number of Democrats coming out against it, and so you had opposition that was just not going to be overcome. So I'm not surprised to see that one go down. And with the schools, I think there's just some general mistrust of the administration of our schools, and that led to the school stuff failing. Oro Valley property tax, I think, is generally something people don't like, whether it's for a park or anything else.
The cliche would make you think that Democrats would be all in for early childhood education, but except for the one outgoing member of the city council, who is not going to be there in a month, everyone else on the council was opposed, and most of the candidates running were opposed to Prop 204, and they had some problems in their campaign despite the really massive amount of money that they raised. They had some bookkeeping troubles. They weren't filing paperwork, describing their contributions and expenses the way that they were supposed to. And I think some of that played into people asking some more questions about what they were planning to do.
Now I want to talk about the city council. Democrats, of course, swept. Steve Kozachik ran a non-campaign. I think he spent $150. Some signs went up, but very few, especially compared to Mariano Rodriguez, his main opponent in the Republican Party. Was that a risky move on his part, not to campaign at all?
It's a little bit risky. He said he raised $140 and had $60 left in his campaign account, versus Rodriguez raising $30,000 and spending a pretty good chunk of that on signs and billboards and ads. So, the incumbent Democrat has the name recognition. He's been, basically unavoidable for comment for as long as he's been in office, and even before that when he was running. He's made a name for himself. People know who he is and generally what he stands for. So he didn't need to put a whole lot of money into telling people that again, versus an unknown candidate who didn't run a very good campaign. That takes a lot more to try and make your case.
I think there was zero chance a Republican would win within the city of Tucson, the heavily Democratic city of Tucson this year in the age of Trump. There was no way Democrats were going to, or that you'd get crossover voting for a Republican. I think Steve Kay came out saying, hey, I want to show that you can get money out of politics. I don't think that's what really happened in this situation. It's a very unique situation where you have voter registration advantage that he had, plus the incumbency advantage. I think in a normal race, not raising any money is probably not a good idea.
And you had Rodriguez, who had to scrub completely his social media history because he was such a Trump booster the year before. He made his Twitter account go away. He made his Facebook page go away because there was so much Trump stuff in there that there was no way you could possibly try and sell that to the most Democrats in Tucson. Yeah, that wasn't going to happen.
Steve Kay could have given money to Mariano, and it still wouldn't have made a difference.
Yeah, that's confidence, maybe bordering on arrogance. I mean, it's almost an insult to your opponent where you say, I'm going to beat you with a $50 bill. But he did it, and handily. So, I guess it paid off.
Yeah. And of course, Paul Durham won in Ward 3. He ran on a platform really championing solar power for the city of Tucson. Will he be able to make that materialize?
Well, the city certainly has budget issues, as we all know, and making those sorts of investments takes a nice chunk of upfront cash. So is the city going to go full in on solar? They're going to have to, poke around in the couch cushions and try and find the money to do that.
Voters also turned down the pay raise for the mayor and city council. Will mayor and city council ever get to earn more money?
I doubt it. Not in this town. Things may change, and people may become more fond of their elected officials. But even though Democrats won by a wide margin, I think that the Tucson City Council still has some, let's say, reputational problems about competence.
So would you say this is an indictment on their performance, or why are Tucsonans not interested in paying their leaders more?
I think it's a general dislike of politicians in general, and a perception that the city council is not doing a very good job, even though they have managed to stabilize their budget. They have managed to get some sales tax passed to help with fixing streets and stuff like that. But I think there's still a sense that they don't do a very good job.
It is a somewhat unusual situation. You have this small group of people who are in charge of a budget of $1 billion who pretty much are earning fast food wages. You really do at times, it's not an indictment of the people who are serving or have served recently, but you get what you pay for. The sort of candidates who are willing to run for, to go earn $24,000 a year for what is really a full-time job, even though we try and pretend it isn't. You definitely winnow the number of people who are even willing to think about doing that because it doesn't really pay very well.
Or able to if you don't have, a decent outside job that you can kind of finagle into your new city council schedule. I'm a big fan of paying politicians well. It's, less likely that they'll be crooked, at least in theory.
I also want to hit on Proposition 454, which was the Oro Valley proposition to increase a property tax in order to pay for development of the Naranja Park, which voters overwhelmingly rejected. What does that vote tell us about what's going on in Oro Valley?
Well, Oro Valley does not currently have a property tax. It was founded originally on the idea that they would never have a property tax. You have a lot of seniors living in Oro Valley who don't want to pay a property tax, and they looked at this plan and they just said, I don't think we need to do the improvements at Naranja Park with the ball fields and whatnot. So I think it was the mechanism.
That's been the dogma in Oro Valley, even for some of the people who are on the town council now. A few years ago were saying, oh, we're never going to have a property tax. And here they were trying to, at least move the ball in that direction a little bit. And it seems to me rather unlikely that will happen anytime soon.
But there was talk about a demographic shift in Oro Valley. Is that not the case?
You are seeing that happen. There are a lot more younger people moving in there than you had before. Families who would appreciate having ball fields for their kids. Yeah. But it hasn't.
Not quite there yet.
It's not there yet, clearly.
And lastly, Hank, I want to bring you back. We touched a little bit on the overrides and bonds for the school districts. The biggest bond proposal was, of course, TUSD's $180 million bond, which failed. Mm-hmm. What would that bond have paid for? So
they originally looked at 3 different options, 180 being the bare minimum. This is the stuff we need to fix immediately. It's things like AC systems that they've been patching with parts they buy off of Craigslist, literally, because they can't find parts that are still being made for these old AC systems. It would have been doors that they have to fix on a weekly basis that, it's just taking too much time for them to keep going back and duct taping all these things. That's what this proposal would have paid for. None of it for administration, nothing like that. A couple of school buses were kind of on the agenda. But TUSD will have to keep on duct taping for the near future at least.
That's all we have time for, but the conversation about Tucson's largest school district continues. TUSD superintendent also came into our studios this week to talk about what happens now that the bond has failed.
Well, what happens now is we take the lessons learned from this election and we apply them so that we're more effective in telling our story next time. I think looking back that we didn't do a good enough job telling our story. That this is not a story about aging facilities and infrastructure. It's about dangerous facilities and infrastructure. It's about kids riding in 110-degree buses that don't have air conditioning. So I think listening to the electorate is important. The voters have spoken. We've got to take those hard lessons and apply them for the next time that we go out. And I think the second big learning is that the community has spoken quite loudly that we have quite a bit of work to do in order to earn their trust. If they are going to support us in the next override or bond. And that's something that our team embraces.
TUSD, of course, also faces the loss of between $4.5 to $6 million in state funding because of falling student enrollment. Student enrollment has been dropping at TUSD for a long time. We've spoken about this before. What are you doing to really stop that and turn the enrollment trend around?
You know, that's a good point, Vanessa. And I think one of the positives that we can take out of last night's loss is sort of the hard lesson that you cannot rely on asking the voters for money to take care of basic operational costs or capital infrastructure. We can't keep going to Phoenix and lobbying the legislature for legislation that they're not really focused on making right now, which is increased funding for schools. The quickest way out of this dilemma is to bring students back into the district, and that was a hard reality that we had to face last night. And so when you talk about the loss of students in the Tucson Unified School District, it has a devastating effect across the budget, not just capital, but also with teacher salaries, with the equipment, the tools, the supplies, the uniforms, everything that we need to run the district. And what makes it harder is the current year funding formula. And so the best way to explain it is in the previous system, the Arizona Department of Education or the state would give school districts their money to operate for an entire year right up front. Now, with current year funding, we kind of operate as a traditional employee in a public school district where every month as we go, according to our enrollment numbers, we're receiving money. So some months it can be more, some months it can be less. So when you have 900 fewer students, our job is now looking at our year-long budget and having to spend less than what we had planned to spend to sort of match the drop. What we have to do is we have to go in feeder zone by feeder zone. We've got to figure out where the kids are going, what schools are attracting them away, and more specifically, what programs are attracting them away, and we've got to replicate those programs.
And in the meantime, you are losing money. Do you expect to have to make layoffs?
The way that we do budgeting is the way that any highly effective district or school should. You know, you keep the classroom at the center of everything that you do. So obviously we're going to start at the furthest reaches of the administration and start looking at what I call Tier 3 cuts. Those are cuts that don't involve layoffs or putting people out of work, but they do involve making some hard decisions around closures of vacant positions, eliminations of vacant positions due to retirements, slash travel budgets, slash consultant budgets, slashed added duty budgets. So you start there and then you go move your way down to Tier 2 cuts, which involve sort of larger scale consolidations of departments, looking at where you can replace positions with existing technology and existing software. And then obviously your last line of defense is at the school level, which we are very confident at this time for the 17-18 school year that this latest round of cuts will not reach the schools. The tough thing is to come to the realization that is I can't make that commitment again if we're sitting here a year from now and we lose another 900 kids.
It also emerged recently that the State Department of Education was incorrectly allocating funds for both low-income students and special ed programs. How will TUSD be impacted by that news? Do you expect to have to repay some of those funds?
Well, this has us a little bit nervous, and I'll start with Title I. Title I is
Which is the program for low incomes.
Absolutely. Title I is a result of legislation during the Civil Rights Act that ensures a level playing field for kids living in poverty. And so Title I is a major funding source for the Tucson Unified School District to provide a variety of services, predominantly in English language arts and math and ancillary services and tutoring and interventionists coming into our schools and additional counselors. And we count on that for services predominantly in areas of the district that have been traditionally ravaged by poverty. So a cut in that area is not going to be good. When you go to IDEA, which is federal funding that's been earmarked as a result of the Individuals with Educational Disabilities Act of the early 70s, that has me even more nervous because that cuts at the heart of the services that we're able to render for students with IEPs who are in the special education program. Typically it pays for vision, for language services, for speech therapists, for our one-on-ones, our instructional aides, a range of services for kids in a lot of self-contained environments. Now, The good news for now is that ADE's official position with the federal government is to recommend that all districts, including the Tucson Unified School District, be held harmless and that we receive a level of debt forgiveness. Now, whether that's going to be approved ultimately is a decision of the federal government, but that has been communicated to us by the Arizona Department of Education.
And in the last 30 seconds, if you could just summarize your sort of overall assessment of the state of TUSD right now.
We have a set of circumstances in front of the Tucson Unified School District that would be daunting to ask any school district to stare down and be successful. We've got a loss of enrollment of 900 students. We've got ELA and math scores going the opposite direction of the state. We have a teacher shortage situation that is got us very seriously concerned, and we have yet another season where we're going to have to make almost $5 to $6 million in budget cuts. Now, at the same time that I'm concerned about the state of the Tucson Unified School District, these dire circumstances offer an opportunity for a rebirth, to shock us all into what we need to be focused on: radical change in the way that we support teachers in the classroom, the way that we hire and select teachers, and the conditions that we create on our campuses. So in that sense, it's a great opportunity for a lot of our teammates in the district office itself and the culture of the district to change and say that we've got to do something differently if we're going to continue to be a viable district in the city of Tucson.
From schools, now to veterans. There's been a nationwide effort in recent years to end homelessness among vets. Still, though, many are out on the streets. In Tucson, some homeless vets find refuge at Camp Bravo.
It's a cool morning, late October. People in these tents begin to rise. A passing train, their wake-up call. This is Camp Bravo, next to Santa Rita Park on Tucson's south side, a place where homeless vets and others can find comfort, food, and shelter. The camp is run by Veterans on Patrol, a program of Walking for the Forgotten Ministries. Leaders of this effort seek out homeless vets and offer safe haven, camaraderie, and a path to support services. Bravo is patrolled round the clock in shifts. Manny was on night watch.
I was 101st Airborne. I actually went in as a voice radio operator, but when they found out that I had some pretty extensive medical background, they made me an expert field medic. I jumped out of a perfectly good aircraft with a medical bag and tried to attend to folks that needed help. This is for your immune system. It has magnesium and C coming up. My name is Martin Marsalek. Everybody here calls me Doc. I am the base commander and chief medical officer, so I kind of keep things rolling along here. This is vitamin C, keep you from catching a cold. Our mission is to go out and find as many homeless veterans that we can possibly locate, bring them in, try to transition them from homelessness to housing, get them medical care, things that they've been doing without for so many years. I'll have to get the make and model of this thing. Give the VA a call, have them get you another mirror.
Camp Bravo, officially known as Bravo Base, is one of several in Arizona, including Camp Alpha in Phoenix and Delta south of Prescott. The portable toilets are donated and maintained by Diggins Environmental Services. The land, water, and electricity by HMS Fasteners. Both are local companies sympathetic to their cause. Food, clothing, and other supplies are donated by the public.
I'm a Native American, and every Native American needs to do his wartime. So that's what I did. I joined the service.
Manny Jimenez is 66 years old and has been homeless for more than a year.
Somebody needs to take a picture of that, yeah.
He's been here at Bravo for several months.
4 years on the USS Pocketuck, an attack oiler. That's a tanker with pom-pom guns. Great against jets. 3 more years Merchant Marines. Yes, I'm an old merchant seaman, drying up in Arizona.
3 times a week, Manny travels to the VA on South 6th Avenue for treatment.
My liver and kidneys are not doing what they're supposed to do. So they hook up the dialysis to it and clean out my blood and return it to me. And that's about it. This side got infected, so I had to move it that side. It's a lube job.
That was an excerpt of a story my colleague Mitchell Riley produced for Arizona Illustrated a year ago. There have been some changes since then. Doc is no longer base commander, for example. But Manny Jimenez is still living at the camp and continues to get dialysis 3 times a week. We went for a visit to find out how life is these days for Manny at Camp Bravo.
Well, it's my home now. Yeah. It's my home, and I got a lot of nice people around me.
Manny's become particularly close to one man he met here, Frank Norcia.
Well, Frank and I, it's funny, we met, we're from the same parts of New York, and we act the same. You know, I'm 20 years older than he is, but we have the same temperament, the same, you know, attitude.
He's my best friend. I go to him for everything. Anything that I have to ask, if I ask him, he's got the right answer, not the wrong one.
Frank and Manny met when Frank and his wife were staying at Camp Bravo. As the two men got closer, Frank started worrying about Manny.
He was missing a lot of dialysis, and he was going towards the down scale of what we call his report card. That's all the different things that are putting in his body and going out of his body.
So Frank started driving Manny to all of his appointments. Frank and his wife have a home now, but he still comes back 3 times a week to take his friend to the VA.
He hasn't missed an appointment in a year.
After Manny's treatment today, the two men are going to look at a motorhome, and they have a plan.
Frank, his wife, and I were thinking about going down to Florida. And that motorhome would come in very handy. You know, no motel bills or anything, just get up and drive and park it, cook, whatever, you know. Yeah, modern gypsies.
Manny says, like Frank, a lot of people have come and gone from Camp Bravo during his time here. And he guesses that today, about 30 people are living in these tents. Manny shares a tent with 2 other men.
I try to keep them up in stitches. Always cracking jokes.
One big change in Manny's life came about 9 months ago when his pet Chihuahua, Petey, died.
I gave him a really nice home and a lot of loving, you know. And he was quite a little trooper. He'd run around and visit everybody in every tent, so I didn't have to worry about him. I knew someone was taking care of him.
It's clear that Petey's death has been hard on Manny, but he says he will get a new dog eventually.
I'll probably wait till I'm more situated. I don't know about getting another Chihuahua because Frank's got 3 pit bulls, and I don't want them to eat them.
Manny says Veterans Day is an important holiday for him.
I understand we've been invited to go on a Veterans Day parade. So I'll make sure my wheelchair is all charged up and ready to go.
He says, though, he feels like a lot of people in this community find ways of honoring homeless vets like him, not just on Veterans Day, but every day.
They do. I mean, people come around every day, you know, bringing big pasta dishes or pies or cookies or something, and saying, thank you for your service. Everywhere from kids to old people, you know. Hits me there. When I first got out, people spit on me. And today, people aren't spitting on me. They're thanking me. It means a lot.
Camp Bravo accepts donations from the public. You can find information on how to give on our website. That's our show this week, but before we go, a quick announcement. I'll be leaving the host seat for the next few weeks as we retool for a new public affairs show. AZ Pulse will launch in January. Please tune in next week. Tony Perkins will be delving into the science happening at Biosphere 2. Thanks so much for watching.